are live, and I'm very excited here to be in this podcast collaboration. I'm Yari Caro, and I'm the host of the Hardcore Soft Skills podcast. And we have Joe.
Hey, I'm Joe Bogdan, and it is such an honor to collaborate with you, Yadi. And I'm the host of the Waypoint Better podcast.
And it's great because we've have this topics that we talked about. We focus a lot on skills, and of course, Joe has a fascinating background that I want to ask you about, Joe, and also in terms of the content of your book, which I have right here. Better Has No Finish Line. I've been reading it, and it's just so full of many great advice. So, and we're going to talk today about the specific skills that we need for leaders, especially in this time. So, I'm going to let you start, Joe, to tell us a little bit about your background as a member of the military and what you have done in order to get you to the book.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. So, yeah, usually when people ask me, about myself, I share first. I'm a husband. I am a husband to an active duty service member, proud dependent right now. Also, I'm a father to a 3-year-old mini poodle, and and currently I'm an HR business partner for a Fortune 200 company where I advise business leaders across the country on all things human capital. As you mentioned, my military background, I'm a veteran of the United States Air Force. I retired after 24 years of service about a year and a half ago. I've had, in my career, I've had leadership experience across multiple fields, primarily in the civil engineering career field, where I started as a wrench turner, backup power systems, and then we naturally kind of grow into positions of like maybe shop foremen, operations leaders, and then continue to grow in our leadership path. I did step out of my career field for some career broadening for a stretch assignment at one point in my career. I worked at a social service center on the military installation where I helped service members as well as their families deal with the challenges that come with military service. And that was absolutely a hinge moment for me in my career. It taught me some of the skills that we're going to talk about today, and also some other key leadership attributes like kindness, generosity, and patience that I just did not have until I started working in that environment. And my career culminated in the Pentagon, where I was a chief of enlisted force development, where I had the opportunity to really steer and shape the way that we develop our airmen education, training, and experience and exposure. So that was just a great time for me, and gained a lot of knowledge there. And then I transitioned into my civilian corporate career. On the side, I'm also the chief learning officer for a solutions-based leadership consulting firm called Connecting Heads to Hearts. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm a podcast host, and I'm also the published author of that book that you're holding. And I really appreciate you supporting that and reading it.
No, absolutely. It's great. It's a great read, I must say. And we'll share. I'm very curious about the skills that you were going to talk about today, because we're going to share which top three skills, and if we have time, we'll talk about a few more for those top leadership skills that just people who are in different roles should have. And if you are new to this podcast or a listener of Joe's podcast, so I'm Yadi, and I have been working. I'm not military, but I have been working with the military in different roles for the past about 18 years or so. And I've learned so much from working with military members in different organizations around the world. So it's been right now, my passion is to help launch teams, relaunch teams, or just educate teams on the top skills they need to kind of ensure that their skills shine, that they are able to do the work. Because I've discovered after working with so many different brilliant people in either projects, technology, and the military, is that it's not just the technical skills that drive people to succeed. It's the ability to work together and create something amazing, either through these soft skills, collaboration, communication. So launching Hardcore Soft Skills about 5 years ago, it started as a podcast, and it has grown into a learning platform where we with workshops and I enjoy coaching teams as well, and it's a lot on that based on the lessons that I have learned with the military and also through my education in organizational psychology and as a coach too. So I'm very excited to talk to you, Joe. So let's just get started. Actually, before we go into the specific skills, I want to ask you in terms of what's your definition of a leader.
Man, so that's a great question. I think of leadership, I've heard people kind of share this idea that leadership is an art, and I think that's true. Some people say it's a science, and I think that's also true. But I really think of as leadership as a practice, as I've evolved in my thinking. And when I think about a leader, that's a leadership practitioner. That means that person's actually getting experience in it every day, right? And a leader is a person who not only practices leadership, but in its basic level, I think of a leader as a person who practices relationship management, which is why I really appreciate your podcast and your book, because those are some of the you touch on some of the things that are so important when it comes to that relationship management. I think there is a difference between a person who actually practices leadership and a person that practices people management. There are two different things. They're both very much needed, but I think a leader really focuses on managing those relationships, and specifically first starting with yourself. The relationship you have with yourself, your standards, your discipline, and your ownership. And then once you can get past that, and then you extend that practice out to influencing others to reach their maximum potential while delivering meaningful business impact, and really balancing both of those things. So that's what I think a leader does effectively, is that practices that idea of relationship management towards goals.
Yeah, and I really like that in terms of relationship management because I agree with you absolutely. Because I used to think that leaders, when coming to mind in the military movies or others, that you have the all-knowing person that knows exactly what to do and drives the team, and the team is looking longingly at the leader to let them know what should we do. But as I have discovered through either research and also through the seeing people that I consider to be great leaders, is that they really take care of the people that they work with, to let them shine, to let them do the work that they need to do, and providing some allowing that direction as well. So definitely all about relationship building. And what you mentioned there about the leading ourselves. So in my book, I have the framework of the connect, communicate, collaborate, create, and correct. So it starts with, as you mentioned, connecting with ourselves, and not just connecting, meaning that we have to know ourselves, know what we're good at in order to be able to lead others or just being able to collaborate with others. I really like in the book that you emphasize a lot about values. And I want to talk about that because it's kind of as if we're our own kind of and organization that you've established very clearly that as individuals we need to have values. How do you came up with that?
I'll have to have a shout out to the person who wrote the forward for my book, John Gronsky. He was probably one of the first people that really brought the idea of personal core values. I was indoctrinated in a career, growing up in the Air Force, and that was the only professional career that I had ever experienced with. I've had some odd jobs before that, but that was the first time I was truly committed to a profession. And we have organizational values, and it's something that you understand, that you embrace if you want to make it a career. But I never really considered this idea of personal values until he brought that up. And thinking about it, I really think that doing that deep work to determine what your, or at least detecting what your personal core values are, it's really important to that self-management piece, that leading yourself piece that we talked about earlier. And it's also really important to lead for the long haul, because if you don't really understand what you're anchored in and what you truly find value in, or you might have a misalignment there, you can become untethered, you know, and And leadership can be very difficult because you'll be transitioning from different teams, different leadership above you, different areas of expertise, and you'll be transitioning back and forth. And if you don't really understand who you are as a leader and what your personal core values are, what your leadership philosophy is, and even your personal definition of leadership, I can see people like me, who I would consider myself a recovering people pleaser, just being all over the place, just being all over the place. So, and that, that'll come off as inauthentic to people, and it could really degrade trust amongst your teams. And as we mentioned earlier, leadership is relationship management. If there's no trust in those relationships, you're not going to be an effective leader.
Yeah, and especially in any this applies for any environment, of course, because if once you're clear on your values, then you can adapt them through whatever you end up. And especially for military, where you don't know the conditions or which environments you're going to be in, having those values is critical. So yeah, absolutely, I really enjoy that part of understanding the importance of having values. Now that we've talked a little bit about the what leadership or what we think leadership is, let's get into the skills that we think are important, especially in these times of a lot of change, for people who want to either have leadership roles or are leaders in their own area. So what do you think it's one of the skills, Joe? Let's start with the first one that you have on your list.
The first one I have is critical to this time when things are changing so much is adaptability. I've said this often that adaptability is a key indicator of leadership potential, and the ability to adapt to different situations, different people, um, different even to the evolution of yourself. Being able to adapt to all of that. That's just really important. And I think that I think about when people don't have that adaptability. You see them so tied to something, they're unable to shift, they're unable to change, whether that's with technology or different dynamics of the groups of people that they might be leading, and everybody has to adapt to them because they're not able to adapt to others. I find that person to create a pretty miserable work environment, and a lot of times in high stakes environments, they're not going to last very long. And I think it's really, and we talk about like, okay, so that's a skill. How do you get it? I think you have to be intentional about it. You have to expose yourself to leading in different environments. You have to raise your hand from stretch assignments. And it doesn't even mean you got to go step outside of your entire career field, but maybe there's a project that your team. I've never been a part of teams where there's no projects available, where
Yeah.
we need people to do some things off the side of their desk. Volunteer for those things so that you can learn about different things, stretch outside your comfort zone, and then you can adapt to those different environments. I think adaptability is just absolutely vital in today's age.
Yeah, and it's great because I actually had that one. I had that one as well as one of the skills that I consider important for the leaders because adaptability. And I was thinking from the scenario of the, let's say we enter in a situation that we think we're not going to like, or changes in the organizations, changes in roles. And I like the advice that you mentioned in terms of deliberately stretching ourselves. But I'm also thinking about if there's a situation that we think we're absolutely going to hate, that we probably find ways to talk to a person that we consider, hey, this person loves this new scenario, or they love this role that they're about to change us in. So let me talk to that person and see what's so great about this. So we can at least see from that perspective, start to change our mind a little bit on that situation. So definitely different ways of building, as you say, is a skill. So we need to build our ability to adapt either by stretching ourselves, but also to trying to look a little bit on the bright side of things if it's something that it's outside our control too. So
Yeah, reframing is absolutely important because I don't know about you, Yadi. I look back in my life, and every time I was given an assignment or something that I didn't think I was gonna like, there was so much value that came from that. So you can even look past you can like connect the dots going backwards and be looking at your life and be like, you know what? Every time that happened, I gained something out of it. As long as you have some introspection and you can look into it. Since I
yeah.
stole yours, what's one of yours?
So I'm going to mention conflict management, and I'm not saying necessarily like conflict resolution. That there will be conflict in every scenario that if we enter the workplace, if there's no conflict, then there's something wrong in that organization, that everybody's just kind of adapting to what somebody says. So it's giving the having the tools as people, not just to being able to kind of be calm in the face of conflict. But if there's conflict, it means that there are people that are caring about an issue, and they just have different ways of resolving it. So it could get a little bit personal, perhaps, but we if we stay into the problem to be solved mindset, then we can definitely address it a little better. So I think having the knowledge of how do we address conflict in a healthy manner, either if we're a team manager, that we are able to address and let the team understand, like, hey, it's okay to have a conflict, it's okay to disagree, let's just do it in this manner, and let's talk about our ideas in a respectful way, just focusing on the problem and not focusing on the person. So having the ability to manage conflict, and even if we may not be that patient right now, I think building that, and we could, I think everybody's capable of building that, we are going to be able to not just have a better team environment, but also come up with better solutions and innovations, because we're able to navigate different ideas. So definitely a skill that we need to develop.
Yeah, I agree. And, we have to be able to know how to manage ourselves through that conflict, because there are some times I'm sure some people will say, well, you should never avoid the conflict. But I actually believe there are times where that's appropriate. And maybe there's a conflict going on between two members of your team. Maybe they just got to work through it. Maybe you don't need to, put yourself in the middle of that. But there's other times where you have to step in, that you may have to step in so that you can show them that there's positivity that can come from this conflict, long as we navigate through it professionally, right? So just having that judgment and knowing when you should step in and step out.
Yeah, and I agree with that indeed, because I don't think that necessarily when there is conflict, the manager should just jump in. It's how do we teach our teams to that if they have conflict, that they are able to solve it amongst themselves, that they have like, hey, you seem to be having a disagreement, discuss it, and if there's any issues, just bring either perhaps a third party in a situation, or if things are heated, when do they know to step back? So yeah, indeed, that the manager should not just jump in at every time to solve the conflict. It's allowing the team to do that, giving the team the tools to do that, and creating just a better environment that people don't see conflict as a bad thing and try to squash it. So yeah.
Mhm.
Now, what other item do you have? What other skill do you have for your list?
I think one, on the adaptability, I'll just go ahead and share another one. I think it's flexibility. And a lot of times we think of those two things as synonymous, but they overlap, but they're not necessarily
Yeah.
the same thing. So I was talking to a bunch of leaders recently about that. And I was saying, a lot of times we think of them as the same, but they're not. And then I would say that in this group of leaders that, we probably have anywhere between 20 to 30 years of leadership per each member. Um, they're adaptable. When you have that many years of experience in the US military, you've developed some adaptability, right?
Oh yeah.
I don't think that we can, I don't think that we're going to look at that group and say you're not adaptable. But there's going to be times where they're not being flexible, and in the Air Force, we used to say this all the time: flexibility is a key to air power, almost to the point where it just annoyed me every time I heard it. It was so common, but when you really think about it, the Air Force has this specific skill, ability to be able to engage in one fight, pull out, and engage in another fight, or engage in multiple fights at the same time. And that's flexibility. So when I think about it, is adaptability is for us to be able to absolutely adapt to different situations and work through different situations and environments. Flexibility gives us the opportunity to switch when we need to. And I would say to most of the team here that the listeners, that we've all had experience not being flexible. We've probably had a vacation that we expected to be, you know, everything go to plan, and immediately when something didn't go to plan, we had problems. We started losing it ourselves. We were frustrated, disappointed, because the plans didn't go the way we expected. And if we're flexible, the more flexible we are, the quicker we can be like, all right, we got to get over that, and we got so we don't ruin this entire vacation, right? In leadership, I think it's really important because things aren't going to go as planned. That's probably the most consistent thing that's going to happen. And how can you not be so married to your plan and flex when needed? I think flexibility is absolutely important.
Yeah, and since you have all the experience in the military, can you recall either a specific situation that you may have not been that flexible, or that you really had to learn the power of flexibility as a skill?
Yeah, I think, I mean, junior version of me would probably have an expectation of what my team could do, right? And the funny thing is, I probably didn't converse with the team, on whether or not this was within their capabilities. So I had a full plan of what was going to happen, and as soon as they couldn't follow through on it, or or my plan just started getting shot from any type of tactical level thing to more of a broad long-term plan, I know that I would find myself extremely frustrated and not in a productive way, and a lot of times when you overthink things like that and you want to stick to a plan that's already been degraded and you don't know when to let it go, all you're doing is wasting time. You're wasting time, you're wasting energy. So yeah, I could name probably hundreds of different things that fall into that. But yeah, it happened plenty of times, especially younger me. Now, older me, I found that it's more like my plan for the day. When it gets shot, I have to pull
And
back.
even then,
Yeah, my wife has to be she has to be my accountability and partner on that, because she knows I'm pretty hard on myself when things don't go as planned.
all right. So still learning is a skill that we
Oh yeah.
continually practice and learn every day. Yeah, absolutely. Me as well. So, and another skill. So you've talked about flexibility, adaptability, and let's go to the next one, because on my end, aside from adaptability and conflict management, another one that I think it's very important is negotiation, because it's negotiation, when we think about it, is about people sitting at a table arguing and fist at the table, and who's going to be the winner on that. And I have learned that negotiation is where you seek your own benefit, of course, if you're clear, but also seeking the benefit of others. Like, how can we all be have a collaborative resolution to the issue at hand? Because we negotiate every day. We negotiate, in a development team, we negotiate the features with the customer. We negotiate the deadlines with our bosses. So it's just a constant negotiation that we have to do. So if we have the skills to manage that, and I've learned that there's a series of steps, like either first preparation of what we want, understanding and preparation to anticipate what the other party wants, then figuring out if we have what we call the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, which is like, hey, if this doesn't happen, yeah, exactly, the partner. And if we can have a good strength if we have to walk away from this negotiation, whatever the negotiation issue might be. And also kind of how to listen in, leading with questions. So there's all these things to learn about negotiations, that when I started learning those things, it opened my eyes to kind of apply to them every day, even with my children, in terms of negotiating with them. So yeah, I think that's definitely a skill that leaders and pretty much team members, we all need to practice and learn the steps, because we build that as we go along, and we will apply it every single day.
Yeah, I think of negotiation as I know I shared with you before we came on about these compound skills. And I think about compound skills like negotiation as, they're a culmination, they are a skill, but also a culmination of other skills. You have to have other skills like flexibility. To get to BATNA, you got to have some flexibility, right?
Hmm.
So I think that, that's a fantastic skill. And especially in matrix environments, anybody who's been leading for a long time, as they rise in their positions in organization, the more likely you're going to be more of in a matrixed environment instead of a more hierarchical environment, where now you have to lean on your influence more than you do on any type of position, right? I think the best leaders don't lean on their position unless they absolutely have to, but at some point that position is not even really even there for you to be able to lean on. So
Yeah.
it really does come to that leadership skill, and I think negotiation is absolutely vital. My next one that I would share is I have a good handful of them here, but this one I'll share. Effective translation.
Hmm.
As a leader, now I don't mean maybe translating other languages, which
Hmm.
that's, I mean, if you got that skill,
Great.
that's amazing, right? I know you
Hmm.
got that skill, Yadi. So, but I mean more from like being able to translate strategic ideas down to the lowest level as needed, as well as being able to translate jargon up to strategic leaders so that they can understand what's happening at the ground level. I find that to be extremely important and not talked about enough. And that comes with competence in your profession, right? So
Yeah.
when I think about when you're in the business world, okay, you have to understand the technical skills that your people are working. You don't have to be like so deep in it that you understand everything, but you have to be able to explain their technical jargon up to the corporate leaders, maybe to the board, so that they understand. And you also got to be able to explain that the broad level strategic, um, the direction that the company as a whole, the organization as a whole is going, and you need to understand that so they can communicate that down to the people at the lowest level, maybe that technical subject matter expert, so that they understand the why behind what they're doing. So yeah, I think that comes with competence and not and knowing the broad, whether that's business acumen or in the professional arms, understanding being a student of war, or and then also understanding whatever that technical capability is that you're overseeing. So effective translation, I think, is a vital skill for a leader.
Yeah, I agree. And making the effort, because it doesn't matter. Because a lot of the times when I see the managers, they see like the distance themselves from the, let's say, the technical team. I'm like, hey, let them do what they need to do. But you really need to understand the different angles, either from the customer side or the technical side. Like in my experience, like back when I started working with IT teams, you told me about cookies, and I thought you were referring to like the actual, Cookie Monster type of thing. So then to having to I really deliberately took the time to get all the certifications to then like take security plus which was a completely different language for me, but being able to like definitely try to understand that, it really helped with engaging with the teams that I was working with. So I that's something that's a great one in terms of having the ability to translate needs as a leader, which takes a lot of practice. Just like you translate a language, translating those things that you're referring to is very important. Now that's amazing. And I would say one more for my end, because we had adaptability, and I'll ask you for one more for bonus. So we had adaptability, conflict management, and also negotiation. I want to add listening as a skill because it applies to everything that you're mentioning there. And it's just that listening is so important. And we're generally, as humans, not so great at it by nature because we are able to process a certain amount of words and our brains get distracted. But if we take that practice to either repeat back to what the other person is saying, removing distractions, we love to scroll as people are talking to us, assuming that we're great multitaskers, and we're not. So I really think that the ability to deliberately practice listening as a skill is important for anybody who's in a leadership position. So, how about for you? Any other that you wanted to add in terms of skills?
I agree on the listening. I would share, I guess, just one last one. I'm kind of teeter tottering between two that's written here, but I would say discernment.
Hmm.
Being able to discern, using good judgment on when you need to engage, when you don't need to engage, when you should descend low because you might need to support your team, or when you need to elevate above so they can work on things for themselves and just get out of their way. Sometimes it might be that discernment between what's most important, that prioritization piece, who you need to invest in right now, all the things. I think that leadership discernment is vitally important, especially when we have so many competing tasks and competing people and everything. All these things are competing for our time. So really exercising the discernment, and there's no real magic way to gain discernment. It's one of those things that
Yeah.
as a leadership practitioner, you just have to practice. You have to be a leader, and you're going to learn as you go, and maybe get some mentorship and coaching along the way.
Yeah, because Joe, that one is a tough one. Because I was going to say, how do we think we're discerning correctly, and we may not be doing so so well on that.
Some
So
of it's going to be learning from your mistakes too.
yeah, yeah, that's good. And I think back to what you mentioned earlier about the values, because I think if you have your values clear, then
Exactly.
you are able to discern better, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you hit it right on the head.
So now we've talked about many skills today. Let's share before we go some final thoughts in terms of because we could keep talking about all these different skills, and of course, in your book and in my book, we talk about very different skills that we need to practice. Applicable for leaders, applicable for team members. So, what are some final thoughts that you have on this topic?
You know, this is what I would share because my book, if it's about one thing, it's about encouragement. And um, I would say, it doesn't, it's not dead upon me that that we both wrote books about, leadership and engagement and communication. But I would say, going back to that first idea of leadership as a practice, is that you're not going to learn everything from a book. You're not going to learn everything from a workshop. And unfortunately, a lot of people write these books and they're so prescriptive that that they sound like this is the key, the blueprint to being an effective leader. And somebody might read that book and think, all right, this is what I got to do, and then they go do
Mhm.
it, and people are going to people, and it's not going to work out the exact same way
Mhm.
that it should, like 10 times you do it, and it's all done exactly the way you're supposed to per the book. And sometimes that's going to be discouraging. And people feel like, well, since it didn't work, even though I did it the way it says I'm supposed to do it, that I'm not a good leader. And that's not true. So, what I would offer is just remember that you shouldn't assess your effectiveness off of a couple bad interactions. You should understand that all of that's part of the leadership journey, and no leader gets through all of it unscathed. And there's no blueprint. Trying to learn leadership from a book is like trying to lead martial arts from a book. You're
Yeah.
probably gonna get beat up on the mat, right? So I think that's just important for us to understand that leadership is a practice, and you actually have to engage in it to get better at it.
Yeah, I agree because it's just so much. There's so much information out there. We can search, do a quick AI prompt, and we get all the answers that we need. So it is as you say that the practice is so important. We just go out there. We could try, and yes, any book that we can read may or may not have all the answers. But I think the key there that you mentioned is practicing and failing, and the not basing our skills based on failed interactions, as you say, because that's where we get all the experience. That's what, if we have the intention, the good intention at heart to improve others, to solve a problem, things that's what counts. And we just keep practicing. And as you mentioned earlier, like getting mentors, getting feedback, it's so important. So we could read as many books as we can and know all the methodologies, but if we don't practice, then it really, as you say, martial arts from a book and then getting hit in the face in a, in a mat somewhere, it's not the same thing. So yeah, so I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to talk here about our respective ideas in terms of skill building for leaders. And again, I want to show your book here. I have my own book as well, so it's a great read in terms of all the, yeah, there you go. Wonderful.
There you go.
Yeah, in terms of all the experience. And I really enjoy the fact that in your book you talk a lot about the military experience, and a lot of my listeners are from the military, so they'll definitely relate to what you have to talk about. So what's the best people for to get in contact with you or know more about your work?
Yeah, appreciate that. If you just visit my website, waypointbetter.com, you'll have access to ways to purchase the book. Also, there's a companion workbook. If you sign up for my mailing list, you're also going to get access to a lot of free resources, self assessment resources, as well as some tactical tools for prioritization, time management, and a leadership philosophy navigator. You also get info on, you'll get early access to my any type of resources that come out, as well as my monthly newsletter and podcasts that come out as well. So waypointbetter.com is the best way to contact me, as well as gain access to a bunch of free resources.
Wonderful. And for me, it's the website hardcoresoftskills.com. I was making some changes on my website, so you'll see more information in terms of you'll find a book excerpt there. You'll find a lot of podcast episodes and more information in terms of different workshops, and sign up to the newsletter as well, because it's great to have these resources that you offer, Joe, and that we're offering, because it's just a reminders that we get on our inbox about things that little things that we can do to improve every day. So thank you again so much, Joe, for being on this LinkedIn Live and this podcast episode with me.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Take care, everybody.